Welcome back to On the Path with part two of Jeannie's story. I'm Dr. Jack Gaddy Hilton. In this continued conversation with my sister Jeannie, we move beyond the earlier parts of her story and talk about the realities of adulthood, marriage, building a family, and navigating life while carrying the impact of a complicated upbringing. This episode contains discussion of family abuse, difficult childhood experiences, postpartum depression, and mental health struggles. Listeners' discretion is advised. The goal of sharing these stories is to create space for honest conversation, reflection, and healing around the realities many families face. If this episode brings up difficult emotions for you, please consider taking a pause and reaching out to a trusted friend, counselor, or support professional. Welcome back to On the Path.
So after that interaction with your ex-boyfriend,
Yeah.
you mentioned your husband, who was an older man. You mentioned that earlier. How did you deal with that interaction of another older man having interest in you?
Well, he was never forward about having interest in me, and I wasn't forward in having interest in him either. Actually, I tell him that I wasn't attracted or interested in him romantically at all because I wasn't available to be interested in anybody, at that point. And so I didn't know he was interested in me. He told me that when he met me, that he knew that I was going to be his wife one day. He just knew he had to wait. He didn't know how long he was going to wait, but he said that he was willing to wait. I was just even more afraid at that point and focused on working out, and trying to get my studies together and possibly joining the Navy.
And you didn't join the Navy and you ended up married. So how did that happen?
God did prepare me for a mission, but it wasn't the one that I thought. It was even harder than that, and that was called marriage. And because I was so bent on not getting married, so bent on never becoming anybody's wife and never being a mother to any children other than my sister and my brothers. So I was already really tired. I already felt very worn down by life and the trials of raising a family I had seen through my mother's life. So at 18, he was 31. He let me know that he was interested in marriage and in having children. And for whatever reason, after knowing him for that period of 1 year, I was just drawn to him. I felt that he was very sincere. He had never made a move. He had never made any kind of advance that would let me know that he was interested in me as anything more than a tenant of his property. He also become a friend, a neighbor, someone who was kind, that could be depended upon. And he had been there for us even when my mother had went to the detention center, Chrome. At that point, I think I knew that that I loved that man because he was the only one that I could run to, cry to, and be afraid and vulnerable with, letting me know that for the first time in my life, I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how I was going to continue to support my family with my mother being away, and that I wasn't strong enough. And so I think from that point forward, I knew that I could rely on him, I could trust him, and that even though I did not trust myself, that I would be, not that I would not be faithful, but that I would be reliable as a wife or as a mother. I trusted him, and I loved him. And so I wanted to do anything that I could to be that person that he wanted me to be.
Mom gets arrested. How did you cope with that?
Well, it wasn't really the second time. There has been other times, just it was a second permanent time, a time that felt longer than usual. Usually she would run away and come back, or that one time I explained to you where she was gone for the entire night. That was like an eternity for me. I think after you go through that, she'd spent about a month or two in the detention center. So at this point, I felt like I was relatively safe. I had a job. My siblings were going to school and they were healthy. We had food in the fridge. I was managing the restaurant. I just, emotionally, I was undone, but I had to, lock in and continue, supporting the family and praying that my mother would be able to be released because I felt that it was very unfair. And also that my father was behind it. I thought that there would have been some kind of remnants of his return, but I believed in my mother. She was very strong. And I just knew that somehow we were going to get through it. And I didn't blame her, of course.
Yeah. And I mean, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, didn't you have like sort of a mom's boyfriend sort of thing?
Yes, I'd say, yeah, like a long-term boyfriend. Yes, that was a serious boyfriend. And really because of him was why we needed to move to a house. So we would have a bigger space for our family. And I know that he was going to be there because he had intention to marry her.
And did you feel safe with another man now kind of living with your mom?
I did. I did feel safe. I didn't have problems or reservations. If anything, I felt happy for my mother. I felt that finally she could move on and maybe be exposed to somebody who was a real man, not that counterfeit that was before. I never considered him to be a man. But this man was very hardworking and he had nothing but love in his eyes for her. And he had a lot of compassion for our story. So, in some aspects, I felt that he was definitely wanting to be a part of the restoration process. And so, no, I didn't feel unsafe. So, marriage at that point for me was trying to live outside myself and not living in my comfort zone, trying to take on a role that I assumed would be different than my parents, but something that I really wasn't sure if it was going to be very natural for me. I never really felt that I was going to be a good wife. Again, I believed in our love. I believed that we were in love with each other. And I believed that with his help, that we could, I trusted him that we could do this together. So it was not, it seemed like it was easy at first because we eloped. And I was so young at that time. I didn't care what dress I wore. I rented the dress. We eloped to Las Vegas and we got married on the Red Rock Mountain. It was very romantic. We got married by Joshua's tree. And so it seemed very promising. And even that wasn't easy because I think I had fainted because of the altitude and being in the desert. But that was a good preview of what marriage was going to be like for me. I mean, at first, I think my husband made it very easy. He was older. We were able to travel. At that time, I was able to get my permanent residency, and I started to feel like I'm becoming normal. Like I'm living a normal life. It's more of a normal life than I've ever had before because now I had residency. I could work legally, even though he didn't want me to work. But I still had that option of working. He wanted a child, and I felt safe enough to feel like I could even have a child and give him what he wants. And so I quickly became pregnant and I quickly had a child. By 19, I was already a mother.
Can I ask a personal question? So this guy now you willingly have sex with, was that a
Yes.
hard process for you to have that normalcy of a sexual relationship with somebody that wasn't in a way that was violent?
Yes, it was very difficult. And part of the reason why I think him and I got along so well is because he had a traumatic first marriage that I'd say was also kind of abusive. And the part about sex was also complicated for him, where she expected performance and he just felt he couldn't because of her verbal abuse. So, in some aspects, him and I actually had that in common. And he was very, very patient, and that was very helpful for me. Probably if it was anybody else, it would have been difficult, but he was very patient and he was never aggressive and he was always kind and patient. And so there were difficulties actually for many, many years, mainly, my mind. I just couldn't get past certain things. I couldn't do certain things. I just didn't feel effective. But nonetheless, I knew that he loved me for me and not because of my performance or how I would perform. I think he got into the marriage knowing about my past. And so, in some aspects, for whatever reason, he felt that it wasn't going to be a hindrance to our marriage. But it was. It was a hindrance to our marriage.
When did you learn that things were safe, or when did things kind of like become easier to be connected to your husband?
Well, unfortunately, I gave birth, and that was very traumatic. I didn't realize then, I realize now in hindsight that giving birth was a traumatic experience and it actually had set me back in our marriage. And unfortunately, it revived a whole bunch of emotions and lack of control. And I probably had experienced postpartum depression to some extent. Giving birth to our first child, I remember my hair falling out. I remember crying a lot. I remember being very emotional when I was pregnant. I remember wanting to escape and be home with my mother. I've had I remember calling my mother every single day and telling her, I can't do this. This was a big mistake. It's all my fault, but please let me come back home. And my mother every day would listen to me and she'd say, no, you love him. He loves you. You can do this, but mommy is here. And she had even come at that time, 9/11 had happened and we had to relocate to Texas. So the distance of being away from my mother and being away from you guys was very devastating because you guys were my whole life and being around you and my sister was my whole life. That being away from you guys and just being with him, a man, was very difficult for me to adjust to. And unfortunately, very difficult for him to kind of learn me and learn my anxiety, my phobias. Yeah. So when was it ever normal? Definitely not the first 5 to 7 years of marriage. Yeah. It's probably more normal now.
So I think about Freddie. I mean, Freddie was like 32 when you
Yeah.
guys married. I
Had the
remember that.
baby, 31 and then 32 when he had the baby.
Yeah, I mean, he and I always butted heads up, but now we're really close. It's funny. I think, I grew up and I think Freddie is naturally drawn to, I think, people who are high achievers. And I think that I earned his respect. I think when I went to go went to school and then became a reporter.
He
But
is drawn to people like that.
yeah, he is. So
Yeah.
honestly, I tell people like things flipped once I became an adult, and I mean, he never really liked kids. Let's just be honest.
Just so you know, he's always comparing our children to you guys, to my 2 brothers, yes. In some aspects, I feel bad for my children because he is always comparing our children to you guys. So if you felt anything about it, just feel worse for our children because they have to live up to you guys' expectations, so or the expectation my husband has because he had you guys first.
He raised us too. I mean,
Yeah.
he was the most prominent male figure in our life for so long. I mean, there was our stepdad, but I had a tumultuous relationship with him.
Right.
Freddie was as a pain in the butt you are, Freddie. He's been a very stable, healthy representation of a male.
Yeah, he's a very constant force. He's, like, just very constant and consistent. Yes.
You weren't going to get anything, besides who Freddie was going to portray himself as, right? And who he
Right.
is. I mean, I lived with you guys a lot. I mean,
Yes.
I spent a lot of time with you my entire life. I'm
Right.
still trying to live with you.
Right.
And
You do, through the phone, and we actually call on you a lot when we're having disagreements.
you do that.
Yeah, you're my husband's go-to.
That's funny. It is, again, it's like a flip of a switch. But yeah, I mean, talk about that. I mean, you came back to Florida, thank goodness, because I was having probably panic attacks of you being gone. I was always
Yeah.
attached to your hip.
Yes. So we did relocate back to Florida. That was, probably a relief to some extent. I was having a very hard time raising the one child by myself. Freddie was busy in a new role in Texas, and I felt very unhappy being away from my family. So we relocated back to Miami. It's not wasn't as close as I wanted to be, but we were in Miami, and things were better, but still difficult. Marriage was still difficult for me. I had to in some aspects be under authority, and that made me uneasy to be submitting and being under authority. I come from a much more evangelical faith background than Freddie does. Freddie came from a Catholic background, but non-practicing, and so a lot of times we did butt head with how to raise our children. So it was not easy. And so even though my husband's Latin, you have to understand he's Cuban. And so he had in his mind the set role that the woman does everything in the house and he does everything outside the house. But the lines don't have to cross. And I didn't really understand that, but having you guys there was great for me because I probably could not raise children without you guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you said you moved down to Miami, but you also went back to the Hollywood house.
Yeah, so the house we had met, we still owned. He had rented it out, and then after living in Miami, I'm trying to think if his role changed. I can't remember if his role changed. I really can't remember. I don't know why I can't remember, but somehow I think he was still working in Miami. But we tried to work. I think we tried. We moved back to the rental after selling our house in Miami, and that was because the house was older, and I didn't like the layout of it, and it was really big, and I liked to not be in such a large house. So I think I wanted to be next to you guys.
And we were always over, just down the
Yes.
road.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I was always over.
Yes.
But now your sister leaves or gets married.
Right. She quickly got married after I got married. And actually, we had our children essentially together. Not the first one, but we were pregnant with the second child. And then we were pregnant with the third child together as well. And the fourth, we also had kind of simultaneously as well. So that was awesome. And that was a great comfort. And then we started to be around each other and have the cousins around each other more so as much as we could because her husband was in the forces.
So when did she leave you to go to Pensacola and then also California?
I don't really remember because I actually left her. And then from there, once I had left the home, Anna had also left the home. And because her husband was in the Navy, they had been traveling in different places. So we just kind of got used to it. And she did better in some aspects, I think, than I did with that.
Well, I think briefly, I mean, timeline, we had to move from the house in Hollywood. So we were no longer your neighbors. We went to
Correct.
Davie.
But you weren't too far away.
No, 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 no. But
You moved to
yeah,
Plantation first.
Davie, the Rexmere.
Oh, Rexmere. Okay.
Rexmere.
Davy. Okay. I see
Davie,
my
yeah.
brother Davy.
And Anna stayed with us briefly there, and I think
Very briefly.
very briefly, and then got married and moved.
I always tell her, monkey see, monkey do. But I didn't think
So
I didn't think she would get married because she enjoyed being a surfer girl and she kind of liked being a teenager and did a better job of it than I did. But I was actually surprised that she actually got married as soon as she did and I think it's just we were always so close that I think that's, whatever I did, she wanted to do as well.
Did it bother you that she moved so far?
No, it didn't. I think I was always thinking about my mother and just how my mother was coping with everything. My mother's hands were always full. So I just felt as long as we were safe and we knew where we were at and Anna was in good company and she was married and my mother was not worried about any of us, that we were okay, that we were always going to be okay. But my mother was still raising you guys. And so, it's always been a lot of my mother on our mom. Our mom's always had her hands really full.
And now you move farther south to kind of Hialeah area. So how was it to move farther away from your mom?
Well, after living in Texas, Miami was not far. I would actually go to my mom's in Davie to visit you guys almost like at least maybe 3 times a week. Because at that point, I was in nursing school and mom was helping me with our children, our 2 boys.
Did you get done with nursing school?
So I did medical assisting school first. I completed that. We had moved. I think I had left Hialeah. I had begun college for nursing school, but I did not complete the nursing program. Even after all the work and all of the prerequisites, I actually did not complete my rotation in nursing school.
Talk about that journey of going to nursing school. You were a mom at this point, I think, with 2 kids. How did you get through it? How did you do it in the first place? That's not easy, especially nursing school.
I felt that I didn't know I wanted to be a nurse. My mother just said, I got to put Anna in something, and I think that she should go into medical assisting or nursing. And when my mom said that, I just thought, oh, yeah, I should do that too, because mom said it. So I did have internally like that education track I had to continue. And so, but my mom said that Anna should do medical assisting or nursing, so I should do it too. And so I went right into it, not really thinking. My husband was hesitant because he was thinking, remember, I'm Cuban. You stay home and I go to work. And I think he just knew that education was really important to me. And I think he always honored that and honored, my dreams of education. So he let me do that. It was very difficult. I don't recommend it if you can stay home. And I actually wish that I had stayed home, but for whatever reason, the path of education was part of my path.
And then you didn't do it. What did you do instead? You did homeschooling, you said.
Yep. So after at this point, we have 4 children. We had 3 biological boys, and then we had adopted a girl. During the medical assisting and the nursing track, I had went to Haiti on a couple occasions with my husband, and we felt that we wanted to have more children, but we wanted to have more children via adoption. We had 3 boys at that point. Child labor and delivery was very difficult for me, and the children were getting bigger and bigger, and they were all boys. So I just said, I've had a traumatic past. I really want a little girl. I feel a calling to have a little girl. And so I really would like to just stay home and I would like us to adopt this little girl. And so we prayed about different ways that we could adopt. And one of the ways that came to us was adopting a little girl from Russia. So after going through an adoption and bringing home a little girl that's from an orphanage, I just felt the best thing to do is to stay home and educate them at home.
What was that process like bringing a non-biological child into your life? Was there pushback from family members culturally? What was it like with your kids bringing something into their lives that they didn't see organically happen, right? You had 3 kids at this point biologically, at least 2 of them seen that 9-month process, but before delivery where you're kind of walking them through it. What was that like to adopt a baby?
So with every child that we brought home biologically, my eldest child used to try and beat that child or drown that child in baby oil or cayenne pepper. We felt that possibly adoption might relieve more biological children from physical pain and suffering from the sibling. But we would talk a lot about having another sibling join the family, having a little girl. And I think that my boys were very curious. They were always very kind and very accepting and playful. And we did prepare them for the child, even though we ourselves did not know what that was going to entail. But we had taken them to Haiti and they had visited children in Haiti and had visited orphanages, and they were very excited about sharing their lives with a child that may not have had a life as good as theirs. And I actually tried to instill in our children fairness, caring, love, and giving to others. So when we finally went to go to Russia, it was 3 trips. The little girl actually ended up being of Asian descent. So we did not prepare our children that she may look different than you guys. We said she might have dark hair, she might have very light hair, because in the people of Russia they look different, but she ended up being Asian, and our children just adored her. Like, to them, little girls only were Asian. And to us, our daughters are only Asian. And we just love this little girl. And this little girl really had an impact on our lives in a great way that it propelled us into ministry, it propelled our children into ministry, it propelled our whole entire life and dynamic. And so, yes, I ended up homeschooling them full time at that point so that we could travel and do more missions as a family and do more work in the church. And my husband's faith also had taken a great stand at that point.
Now, I mean, your family is not completely white, right? Your kids are half Cuban. They're darker skin. I mean,
Yeah, my
depending on
husband's Cuban. Yep.
yeah, depending on the weather, your kids fluctuate between lighter skin or dark. South Florida, you can kind of get away with kind of that those golden tans. Asian features a little bit harder. Did you guys deal with a lot of racism or comments or feedback?
Sorry, yes, that was one of your questions that I overlooked. So, yes, so because of my husband, he's 100% Cuban, that dynamic in that culture, adoption's not really something that is very familiar to them. So we got comments like China, looking Chinese, even though she was not from China. But regardless, it's a very loving family. Cubans are very loving and they're very family oriented, and so immediately my mother-in-law and others the like, apologized and just fell in love with our little girl as well, and it did become part of the family culture.
What about our family? And then also, I mean, people at your church, like, did anyone give you weird comments?
No, I mean, in the church, I think we definitely stood out. I would tell people, some people, they raise families and we have a tribe. And then when we would, go places, when you're homeschooling, you have to get used to being weird. That's just what it comes down to. I think that quickly God did not want us to blend in, but to stand out. And we did. And so as far as church goes, people were intrigued. We were given a lot of opportunities because of it. We continued to go to to Haiti and bring our children alongside. But it was always a wonderful experience. In the homeschool community, there was some looks because we look different. But, I speak French, Italian, Spanish, English, and we learned some Russian. And then we ended up learning some Chinese. And we continued to adopt. And we adopted another little girl from China. She was special needs. That was difficult too because people were like, well, your children are healthy. Aren't you, you're just going to count your blessings and just say, here, you're just taking a risk every time. You're endangering your children. What if you bring an unhealthy baby and now you're going to China for special needs? You're just taking away from your own children. And so our Russian daughter is named Hope. She's named after my mother-in-law. And then my second daughter's named Faith because Faith was special needs and we had to have Faith to bring Faith from China. And I only saw my daughter's sister as being Asian because I wanted them to look alike and also to have that in common where it wouldn't just be that they're both adopted, but that their culture, that they would have no shame of being part of the same culture, even though Russia and China are very different, but that they would inherently have the same features and have that. Because I just thought if I have a sister, that which is the best thing in the world, then everybody should have a sister. And I couldn't imagine having a daughter without having a sister.
But then you ended up with another son.
Yes. And so we continue to grow our family through adoption. And we also did some foster care as part of ministry outreach and brought different children from the US into our homes. That's a lot different situation and circumstance and very painful. Didn't feel it was the best fit for our family, but we endured that. My children had endured that. And I thought it's very painful. And we, at this point, had sons in the middle school ages. And I think they had had enough of just kind of not having structure and being homeschooled that we decided to put our children in a Christian private school. And I just thought, okay, my heart's broken enough. I can't take any more heartbreak. We're just going to stop fostering and we're going to just get a job. And at that point, I thought I would get a bit of a break. And I became a teacher. And I ended up getting a job in a private school and where I could still take my children to school and still be along with them and still, in a sense, homeschool them and be there for them. And I thought that was the best aspect for my children coming from China and Russia so that they would have flexibility and I would always be there with them in some aspect to defend them or protect them. But we ended up having a call about a little boy. And it was actually from the church. And the call was that the little boy needed a home. There was actually two little boys. And he had already been adopted. He was from China. And I said, I'm not fostering anymore. So I could minister to you. I can minister to them because I know how hard adoption could be, special needs and China adoptions. I know a little bit of the dynamics of that. And so we ended up ministering to a family and trying to convince them to keep their children and learn that, hey, adoption and biological children is a little bit different. You're going to have to wait, for time. Time's a healer. But ended up adopting that little boy. We ended up adopting a little boy and bringing him home. So we have 3 biological boys and 3 adopted children, 2 girls and 1 boy. Children are from China and 1 is from Russia. But we adopted the last child in the United States.
And he has needs too.
He does. Yep, he's also special needs.
Talk about them now.
They've overcome a lot of their special needs and educational needs and medical needs. So all that nursing was put to good use. I ended up using it to nurse my children and continue to do so as my last son still has some needs at home. And so he's overcome them all. They still have some language and some speech, and they're probably going to continue to need it. But they are very resilient.
How old are they?
When they were adopted or how they are now?
All your kids now.
So I have a 24-year-old. He'll be 24 in March. I have a 22-year-old. I have a 19-year-old. I have a 17-year-old. And I have a soon-to-be 15-year-old. And I have a 12-year-old.
So if you can say something positive about each of the kids, what would it be?
Because you told me positive, I'm going to think about only positive things to say about my children. And it's hard not to say anything not positive, but things do pop up in your mind sometimes, because you have to have a good sense of humor if you're a parent. So I'd say the first child, his name is Frederick John. I'd say he's very resilient. My second child, his name is Mackenzie. He's a son. And I would say that he's very empathetic. I have another son. His name is Noah. And I would say he's very kind. I have a daughter. I'd say that she is very intelligent. I have another daughter. I would say she's very responsible. And I have my son. I'd say he's an old soul.
You feel called to be a teacher? Talk about what that was like for you.
I spent, I think it's 15 years teaching, but 9 years of those years in the classroom in elementary school. And I spent 9 years teaching just first grade. I never saw myself as a teacher, but my sister Anna says that that's all she saw me as. So if you want to know about your calling, just ask your sister or your brother. So my sister said she always saw me as a teacher. And because she said that, I think I opposed that title for most of my years. So I had to homeschool to really appreciate, being a teacher. As a homeschooler, you kind of see what works with your own children and then realize like other people's children listen to you better than your own children do. So in some aspects, being in the classroom was a great blessing to me because it kind of gave me balance and it also allowed me to help others. I could see myself in others and I could see, different dynamics of my children's characteristics in other children. And I really enjoyed it a lot. I felt there was a great sense of justice in the classroom, especially after COVID. And losing education to some extent during that. I felt that was a calling. That was definitely a mission. I believe that education in the classroom is a mission. And I believed heavily in the need for that, especially for the faith, and to contest for the faith, for what children are learning and what teachers can offer and what teachers shouldn't, be teaching in the classroom. But I really enjoyed it. I gave my 110% to it, especially in the ministry aspect, because I was also part of a ministry. I worked even outside of the classroom. I worked with youth group, and I worked with children from preschool to high school and college and beyond. And I really enjoyed it. It was all very rewarding, and I don't regret it. But I do believe that is probably behind me. I don't feel called to the classroom at this point in my life.
What was the
Yeah.
hardest point in your life?
The height of the abuse from my father. And not just to myself personally, but with every other element of my, the abuse towards my mother and my sister and my siblings and the difficulty of just surviving. And then the other would probably be being a very young mother and wife and coping, with that was also very difficult for me. Probably because I was not equipped. I was always going off of a model that I never actually understood or knew and trying to reinvent the wheel constantly to the point that the wheel just burnt out. And my mom says that I'm all over the place and I used to be okay and now I'm not okay. But I think there was a time that was very difficult for me to smile and carry on. I felt there was failure in some aspects of my childhood that I was not in control of. And then there was failure when I was in control. And in some aspects, the part of my childhood, I could relieve myself of guilt because I was not in control and it was afflicted. It was put upon me. I didn't choose it. But as an adult, I did choose it. And I was still a part of the failure and I was still to blame. And I was that parent that made the mistakes and could have done a better job or overlooked my child. And so for me, that was more, in some aspects, more difficult for me. The accountability and being a parent and the responsibility that comes with being a parent and the lack of success in parenting with your own children.
When you look back at that as being a failure, where's the failure aspect?
With 6 children, you can't meet every need, and there's personalities involved. And, you think you could read all the books, and I've read many on parenting, and you just think like there's a formula, and there isn't a formula. Sometimes there's a chemistry, and sometimes, you're just not available emotionally to give more than what you can give. And one of the things I think early on that I struggled with a lot, that was part of that conversation, that question you'd asked me earlier was, how was it that you coped, as a woman, trying to have a relationship with a man? Well, a lot of it is, how did you cope even being a mother, offering yourself to children, this time your children, not just your little brother and sister that you could sit in front of the TV and have them, behave and give them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but your own children now where, you are responsible for essentially everything that happens to them, and that was a lot of pressure for me. And I overanalyzed it a lot. And sometimes I had the greatest difficulty sometimes with just hugging my children or having my children being vulnerable for my children to run up to me. Sometimes I felt like if they were just grabbing me, I was being attacked. And sometimes my husband would just come and hug me from coming back from work, and I felt like I was being attacked. And so it was very difficult for me to overcome just some of the physical issues from the past. And I had to really work through them and go through a lot of therapy and inner healing, dealing with affection and giving affection and just being vulnerable and allowing closeness with my children. As close as I wanted to be to my children, I just felt, again, I was in that box that I couldn't get out of.
It's funny that you bring that up. You gave me some advice a long time ago, and do you remember what I'm going with advice with raising kids? You gave me advice to not kind of like go through the motions because I've done it before,
Hmm.
right? You said, my kids aren't your kids in that way. Like these are your kids.
Yes.
Like you can't be burnt out because you've already done it. And you kind
Yes.
of did the same thing. Like you raise kids.
Yes.
How do you not get tapped out from already raising kids or helping with that?
Well, you do. You do get tapped out from raising your first kids, my siblings, because in some aspects you gave them your best. Even though it was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I actually could hang out with you and sit down and watch, whatever Barney together and really take in, the songs with you and watch you,
I was not watching Barney. I was watching Buffy. There's a difference.
No, you're watching Barney at that time. I'm talking about when you were real little, with little curls and you're eating plants and eating your own poop. I was talking about those times. But in some aspects, because I was younger and more available, I could, savor that moment. And when you're older now and you're kind of doing it the second time around, and this time, you have the demands of cooking supper and trying to get along with your husband and not seeing him as the villain, then you're kind of thinking that, my child just needs to go to bed early, as soon as possible. And I hope he doesn't wake up in the middle of the night. Because at that time I was also nursing. And sometimes it was every 2 hours. And remember, I told you my husband's Latin and somehow he works only in the garage and I work in the house. And so there's no cribs or nursing in the garage. But sometimes you give your first set of children the best. And sometimes you don't. And so, I look forward to being a grandparent. I look forward to having a great relationship with my children now as adults and as teenagers, because I have an excellent relationship with my mother. And our beginning was not easy beginning. And there was a lot of failure. But I never saw my mother as a failure. And I never saw any of my siblings as a failure, and I never saw any of my siblings as a mistake, and I didn't see my own life as a mistake. And so in some aspects, that did give me hope and resilience to carry on and keep trying and not give up with my own children and my own relationship and in my own marriage.
So you kind of alluded to it. You're a Christian woman, you have kids. Things weren't always easy because of your own trauma history, your husband's situation. There's a recent time that you kind of were in a rough spot with your husband. You don't have to go too deep into it,
Mhm.
unless you want to. How did you and how are you coping with that?
Why are you doing this to me? I went through a very hard time with my husband just recently because our children are getting older, and we're not empty nesters yet, but it's right around the corner. And like I had mentioned, I have a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old living with us. I have a 19-year-old away in college, and so the dynamics are we're all kind of like shifting, and it's a different dynamic. They're not babies anymore, but yet as a mother, there's a sense that they always are babies, but then you're kind of offending them because you're not giving them the respect that they deserve and that they have earned. And so you can't keep parenting as if they're 5, and then wonder why they're tuning you out, when they're actually 22 or 19. So it's been very difficult. And somehow my husband and I have been in survival mode for quite some time, even with being a teacher. And like I tell people, it's not just the 6 children I have at home, it's also the 30 children in a classroom, or the 9 years of 30 children in a classroom, and then in COVID and working online and all the other things that, that our life just recently entailed for so many people in the world, and just how difficult life is in general. And sometimes you're just hitting the drum with the same beat, and things are happening and you're just kind of like boom, 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 and yet it's not working. And so it's been very difficult. We used you as a lifeline, our faith first, Jackie as a lifeline in therapy. The P.A.T.H model has been such a blessing and help to us, me personally. I'm going to apply that in ministry, and I'm going to apply that probably everywhere with preaching and sermons and sermon writing. It really is a lifeline. I think there's a rhythm to it in marriage. There's a rhythm to it in raising our children. There's a rhythm with your neighbor. There's just a rhythm in every aspect that we do. It's like almost, it's how to be human again. I think we forget how to be human, especially in a world of AI and technology, and where every little thing, like I said, is recorded. Could you only imagine if you're going through some kind of traumatic life like we had been through and everything was recorded? Or I couldn't even fathom, but there are people right now living that way, or possibly going through the same things that I had once went through. But my marriage has almost been at the divorce button many, many times. Recently, more real than ever before. And that was just because of continuing to wear a hat that just did not fit. Actually, has never fit, but I've tried to make it fit and make it fit. Like I said, the culture, the boundaries, you work here, I work there, these roles, those robotic roles. And somehow, because of you, Jack, and having you work with us and us coming to a place of meeting in the middle and working in ways, even though it's not a role, or it's not a church role or church title. I'm a woman, and oftentimes I'm the spiritual leader of the household. It's very difficult. It's out of order. It's not what's common, but it's what happened. And so just trying to get back into the order that God asks of us and God knows is the right fit. But I actually cherish my marriage more now than ever. And now I don't look at difficulties as the enemy. And I don't look at difficulties as the end all of end all. I actually look at them now as opportunities and challenges that I believe that we can overcome. And at the same time, because we were so in love, and because we are so in love with each other, and because love had to get work at, and love had to be revived, and we had to be open and transparent and not hide from people, and we had to say, hey, no, we're not okay, and not sit with a mask and pretend we are okay. We got great rewards because of that. And I really believe with our sons' careers and directions that they've moved, if we had got divorced, we probably wouldn't be reaping the fruit that we're reaping right now. And so I'm so passionate about families. I'm so passionate about marriage. I'm so passionate about children. And I tell my sons about marriage and about children, because I want to be a grandmother. And so we're very excited for what the future holds for us.
So you mentioned the P.A.T.H model. Talk about what is the P.A.T.H model and how you apply it in your life. And even you got trained in it twice.
Yeah, I'll probably go through it again and again. The P.A.T.H model is an amazing tool. I believe that was God inspired, but also inspired by an amazing doctor. He's Jack Hilton. He's my brother. I'm so proud of him. He has been given many gifts from God, and he's applied it not just for himself, but for many others, because of his care and passion, because of his empathy, and because of his past, present, and also because of his future. He believes in a future. He believes in his present. He also believes in helping people. And so it's really important, I think, not just, hey, I got help, and holding on to that and saying, okay, that was great. But when you look back and you want to help others, I think that is really important. I think that says great things, for about a person that wants to look back and help others, even though your life is going amazing right now, and it's probably going to continue to be amazing, and it's going to just blow up everywhere. I have personally used P.A.T.H. You've used P.A.T.H with me, Jack, and I feel really blessed by it, because it was a lot of answer to prayer, and it also is very helpful because there are different views about psychology, about therapy, especially in the church. There are a lot of hurting people because of these views and these dogmas, unfortunately. But you've been a bridge. You are a bridge builder, and you've been a bridge, and P.A.T.H is a bridge for healing, for honesty and transparency, as well as alignment with your faith, and not doing away with your faith to pick one or the other. We can't do that anyway. The Bible says you can have 2 masters, but I believe that P.A.T.H is definitely God ordained, and I believe in what you're doing, and I love the work. I have actually a couple of other ideas for you to expand your work. And I definitely want to be a part of your work. I want to come under you and I want to work with you and for you because I can't imagine myself doing anything else but that.
And that's why I trained you, because I paid her to say that. No. Honestly, I will and have always probably attributed Jeannie. If it wasn't for Jeannie, I probably, to some degree, I don't want to be too dark, wouldn't be where I'm at or around, you know? I honestly, my life is saved because of having you, my life in those instrumental times. You know, mom, like you mentioned, there's no faults. It's like a no fault accident, right? But there's long-term consequences. And
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time because of abuse and loneliness turning to you. And if you weren't there, you were my steady adult. If you weren't there, I don't know where I would be. How many times have I broke down crying randomly at your house and you just sat there, Becky, what's wrong? You know, you were the first person in my life to see me. And now because of that, I'm where I'm at as a result.
But I also think, Jack, you're also willing to do the hard work. You know, you were also willing to navigate the uncomfortable and walk in truth in the sense that I'm not okay. And then things are not perfect in my house. And I was gonna say that you also never did homework. I was always concerned about that. Sometimes I would think you were crying because you didn't do your homework or because I found out that you didn't do your homework. But you were very inspirational in helping me with my children. And you were my Manny at one time. Remember, you were my Manny. You helped even clean my house.
Manny. I was a lived in
I
Manny.
love
Yeah. I got paid and I got to go to Disney World a few times and
Yes.
swim.
Yes. But
I
just
love your kids. I love your kids. Your kids are, I tell people, I have 3 kids, but I also raised 3 really, and then Hope kinda came a little bit later,
yes.
near the end of my high school career, and then Faith came when I was in college, so they didn't really get the big stay-at-home effect, but if you ask Frederick, you ask Mackenzie, Noah, they can tell you you know, stories how I rough play with them, I beat them up, you know,
Yes.
Whisper, the game we used to play all the time, like, they were my kids. I loved them. Like, I was very protective of them, and I still am. I always watch over them. So it's like I got to learn how to love because of raising your kids with you, and do that journey with you. And I learned how to care and kind of be that nurturing aspect of what I wish I had and I got from you.
Yes. I remember one time, Jack, that I was crying because I had failed a portion of the exam from nursing. I remember you being there, and I just remember you. I mean, at that time you were 16, and I remember just crying and you just saying, Jeannie, what is it that we have to do for you to pass? And I'm willing to be here every day to take care of your children so that you can finish nursing. And I remember that that was the moment that I just saw your sacrifice or your willingness to sacrifice for my family that I'd never seen in anybody, not even at that time in my spouse. But that really did strengthen me, inspired me to say, nursing is not as important as being home and nursing my children. And as much as I appreciate my brother willing to sacrifice his childhood so that my children could flourish while I'm flourishing, I would rather choose my children and staying home and my brother to continue to have a life that I never did, which is just being a kid, just being a teenager, just going to high school. And so that always stayed in my mind. And it was a part of the reason why I didn't finish nursing school, and I have no regrets.
Again, kids early, I mean, younger than 16, spending time with you in Hollywood all those times, it gave me purpose. I didn't see it as
It kept you out of trouble.
it got me out of trouble, honestly. I was
Yeah.
like a straight edge
You're
kid.
like a little daredevil.
I wa
Yeah, you're a little daredevil.
I mean, you grow up on the streets of, Miami, Hollywood. You kinda have to.
Yes. Yes. But you were also very close to your brother, and the boys, you guys were really close too. And you were very entertaining to my children.
We were kinda silly, weren't we? So, I mean, I wanna respect your time, and we have a few more minutes. The death of your uncle. You said there were 2 pyramids. That was its own little thing.
I'm sorry, repeat that again. The pyramid?
Yeah, you mentioned you had, like, 2
Yes.
equal turtles, this was its own.
Yeah. Interesting that you said that because I guess that's what made it so hard. I didn't bring that up myself. Is that I guess while raising the children, the death of my uncle Arturo Gatti, essentially he was like a father figure to us. You know, before my mother remarried, he was the father figure. He was that constant. Before I married, he was the constant in our life. He ensured that we had resources while we were in the United States. He wanted to be that redeemer, that father for us. He wanted to protect us. He was devastated by the news of our abuse. I remember being in court and him calling us as busy as he was and just saying, no matter how many fights I fought, I could never do what you just did with your dad in that room because your dad was so scary that even I was afraid of him. And so I remember him just being that voice of reason. He was so excited when we adopted our children, and he was so for adoption, and he just wanted to be a father. And we were always very close with him and also very jealous of him for his attention. So whenever he got in a relationship, we tried not to mess it up too much, but we kind of wanted to. And we were successful for a time and had him all to ourselves. But unfortunately, he did run into some bad relationships and it cost him his life, which losing him was very devastating to both our mother and to us individually. We all dealt with that in a different capacity. And that was, it took a piece of you. And that's really where my faith, I think, probably propelled as a minister, as a chaplain. Probably my sense of justice came out of the fact of and evangelism, realizing where is his soul. That's when I decided before I entered and completed my education in divinity, which I'm still finishing, by the way. But to me, the reason why I chose divinity is because those questions, what happens when we die? Where do we go? The fact that his death was so violent, the fact that he was taken from his family, isolated, the fact that he was also abused prior to his death, again, was just all different remnants of what my mother had been through, and my other uncles and aunts to some capacity. And so it was very difficult because one of the scars of the Gaddies, and the other family as well, and the Hiltons is the scar of abuse and affliction to some extent. But of course, this really brought me to the point of the affliction of Jesus Christ and what God has himself endured for us. And so for me, I just really, at that point, just, really related to my faith, as that was the only way that I could actually survive going through life with the pains and taking him away. I always tell people, like, someone's gone when you are so close to them and you love them so much, but they're gone because you actually feel that they're not present on the earth anymore. And that's just the way it was. Earth was a lonelier place when he had left. And recently finding out that his son has basically shared the same fate as him, unfortunately has revived wanting to do this podcast with you, Jack, and standing up for the first time on both of our feet, where we want to bow and you want to cry and you want to stay on your knees and you want to just be vulnerable. But yet God gives you the strength to stand and to continue fighting for the sake of humanity in some sense, and sake of of just as a family, and also for answers and for justice, and out of love, the love of the truth and the love of somebody's memory, and making sure that their name is restored accordingly, because that's just huge. It just, you see a lot of defamation and people have a perception of what they think because he was a celebrity, but they don't understand that our tour guide, he was in love with his family. He had a very strong family that nobody could call and say, this just happened. He passed away. He didn't have a family. Absolutely not. Actually, the contrary is true. Because you didn't know him, you didn't know his family. Because you didn't know his family, you didn't know him. And therefore, there is a truth, and that truth will come out very soon.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't realize this, but I mean, we were like his kids,
Yes.
he was a father to us, he spent a
He
lot of
gave me
time.
away. He gave me
Yeah,
away at my wedding. Yeah.
he gave you away. He was a father figure to us. So, it was a shocking death, that occurred. And to have this happen again, and again, people not knowing who his family was and, to him, and then to not have a connection to his son because of circumstances that didn't allow us to,
Right.
it was that lost times two again.
Right. Yep. But regardless, even though we didn't have contact with his son, we remember his warning and remember that he was very afraid and very concerned. And that's probably why he fought for his son until his death. And we remembered that he was concerned. I think I already mentioned that. But because of hearing again that someone, your blood has been taken from you, your kin has been taken from you, that there is something inside of you that feels violated, no matter how distant, how close, because it's blood. There is a violation there, and there's an injustice that even rings in your blood. Your blood is boiling and you want to know the truth. And even though I did not know him, I saw him on camera constantly, because he was constantly being portrayed in camera and exploited to some extent, that we knew that his father, our tour guide, did not want his son to also become a boxer, because he knew how hard that life was. And he had lived a life sacrificing and getting beat up so that his son would not have to inherit that. That was not the inheritance that tour guide wanted for his son, Junior. And so we had saw that, and we stayed quiet, but at the same time, we know that does not come without suffering and without a loss, because like I had mentioned, my father's side, that is the way that he had grown up, and we had lived the consequences of the damage of that.
So as we wrap up, I
Yep.
appreciate you talking about that because it is fresh and it is like you said, not even a scab because that would say that a wound kind of healed over and it never really did. It just looked different because we put it to protective energy and to doing work, and so to have something like that happen, you're like, whoa, there's that wound again that, is a reminder that couldn't heal because some injustice was left unknown. And I think mom mentioned that in her version of the podcast was that the death was not just a car accident or a passing. It was a tragedy because of really the brutality behind it. So, on a lighter note, talk about each of your lovely siblings and what you love about them and
Oh goodness.
your mom and what
My
aspects
first kids, my first kids are my siblings.
of your siblings. Talk about characteristics that you see yourself in your siblings, aspects of your mom that you feel like you got, or, anything like that.
That my siblings have for my mom, or that we all have for my mom in the end.
Surprise me.
Oprah. This is a very high maintenance podcaster, by the way. Well, my siblings are very near and dear. I don't know if you know this, but I originally moved just to be next to my sister because that's my bestie and the Westie. Oh, the boys were they were born 8 and 9 years later, so they were the babies. My sister might have said they were the rivals. No, I see myself in all of my siblings. Like I said, I see that we are like twins. We could be 8 or 9 years apart, but then again, I am married to an older man, so I guess age difference doesn't mean anything to me. Does that say something about me? But I just don't see I feel older and I feel more protective of them, but I don't feel that they are my youngers. At this point, they've grown and they've actually superseded us as women, and they've become very brave young men, very successful young men, and we're very proud of them. I'm also very proud of my sister. So I see myself in all my siblings. I think that, like I said, I think we're twins. I feel we are the same on the inside, but people don't see that on the outside. They think I have wrinkles. I have no idea what they're talking about. But I'd say that my sister is very brave. I feel that she's braver than me. And she's also very fit right now. And she's fitter than me. And that's, am I a little bit jealous? Yeah, I'm a little bit jealous of my sister because of that. I've always found her to be very beautiful and more beautiful than me. She's always had the fair skin and the big hair and thick hair and just very brave. Like I said, she surfed and she skated. And so I found her to be very brave. And she was also an incredible gymnast. People don't know that. She was an incredible gymnast, soccer player. She would beat up boys and stuff. So yeah, she was definitely always braver than me. I tended to be shy. My brother David's a little more shy, but he ended up being very brave, and I'm very proud of what he is doing with his life as a detective and police officer. I really admire him. I think that I have a funny story about him. I don't know if I should share that, but basically, he's always been a fashionista to the point that's a little bit concerning sometimes. But but we've always admired how much he likes to look good and dress well. I guess even over eating, I guess clothing and how you look comes first, but I've always admired that he's shy, polite. He's like, a choir boy, and he's also a fashionista, as much of an oxymoron as that is. My youngest brother, Jack, is very, very intelligent. He's very assertive and affirmative. And well, he's the most educated out of all of us. I don't know how that happened. I started first, and then he finished before I did, and I'm hoping that I do finish. But very, very intelligent, very gifted, very talented. I think too talented. But I think that he's also maybe the best listener out of everybody in the group. And do my siblings remind me of my mother? Absolutely. My siblings emanate, like I said, we didn't have a mother and a father role. We had one mother who was like a lion. I see that line in all of my siblings. If I didn't say the same traits for each sibling, it's not because I don't have the same amount. I could go on and on and on about all of them. Those are just a few, but I'm all proud of all of them. And I wish I could grow up to be like any one of them. I would be happy. But we're all raising our kids together, and I think that life is just because we're just going to see how that's going to go because parenting is so hard. But I'm so happy that we're here together to catch each other and remain together, growing strong.
How do you feel when you look at everything that you've gone through and shared in the 2 hours that we've been talking? Why didn't you go down the dark road?
I can't say that I didn't go down the dark road. I considered, spiritually speaking, we've all strayed, right? We've all strayed and fallen short. I do believe I have gone down the dark road. It may not have been as public as most people, would expect it to be, or it may not have been obvious. But I think in some aspects, like I mentioned, I possibly had postpartum depression when I had my first child. I considered that the dark road when I was arguing with my husband all the time and causing arguments for no reason. I mean, at that time, it seemed like there was a reason, but that to me is a dark road. Why did I mean, the only difference I think is that I had faith in God, and by God's grace, I didn't give up. But I think that all of us have experienced the dark road, to some extent, or the other. I figured even during my abuse, I mean, there's a lot of dark thoughts that came to my mind. Did suicide come to my mind? Absolutely. Did not being in a relationship with a man come to my mind? Absolutely. So there was a lot of ways that I could say I did go down the dark road. It just, God held me together.
One last question, okay? What's one thing you
Yes.
would tell people that maybe have walked or are experiencing similar paths? Other people have experienced or are experiencing abuse, adoption stuff, broken marriages at time. What would you tell them?
I would say faith is really important. Faith and the belief that perhaps you can't, but God can, and that nothing's impossible with Him. And at the same time, I would say, that family structure is so important. That's something that God did give us. Without families, we don't have the church. And without the church, we don't have families. You used to call me Mother Teresa, and I don't feel that I am Mother Teresa in any aspect. But one thing Mother Teresa does say is if you want to change the world, and once upon a time I did want to change the world, she says that you should go home and love your families. And if you love your families, then you will change the world because they will grow up to be better people. And then you will have the capacity to have more children or to have the faith to get married and have children or to adopt children, however way you see that you want to add to your family, because, family's also your neighbor. Families is people in the community. Families could be your teachers, because at one time my teachers were like my family. They were my heroes. And so I'd say don't give up, don't isolate. And I'd say communication is really important. Speak up. And I didn't have a voice once upon a time, Jack. The PATH model helps you find your voice. And I think that your voice is very important and it's very needed in today's generation.
Well, thank you, Jeannie, so much.
I
And
love you.
I love you most.
Love
Thank
you.
you for joining me and
Thank you, guys.
on this episode of On the Path.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.